This is the Epoch Times.
Welcome to Epoch Audio, showcasing the best journalism covering news, culture, and society, addressing issues overlooked or avoided by other media. For the text version of this and more articles providing truth, tradition, and hope, please go to theepochtimes.com.
U.S. Supreme Court rejects challenge to COVID-19 vaccine mandate, written by Jack Phillips. The U.S. Supreme Court on November 13 declined to take up a lawsuit filed by 4 New Jersey nurses to challenge a now scrapped state COVID-19 vaccine mandate. The justices will not examine a U.S. Third Circuit Court of Appeals decision that dismissed the nurses' challenge as moot. In the Supreme Court's list of orders released on November 13, the court rejected an appeal in the case. Katie Stejny et al. Versus Murphy, Governor of New York et al. No comment from the justices was provided. In early 2022, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy issued an executive order that unvaccinated covered workers must obtain their first dose of the primary series of a COVID-19 vaccination by January 27, 2022, adding that those workers have to give adequate proof they've received all their shots by February 28th of that year. Those who do not provide sufficient proof must be considered non-compliant. In an appeal to the High Court, the nurses argued that the vaccine mandate violated their rights under the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, which they argued encompasses their right to refuse to get a medical procedure and their right to privacy. They also said the rule violated the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. The nurses Deborah Hagen, Jamie Rumfeld, Katie Stejny, and Marriott Vitti filed a lawsuit against the governor's office and said that, although the order allowed for religious or medical exemptions, the state mass denied religious exemptions in state institutions, stating that accommodating people with religious exemptions would constitute an undue burden on the state because the employees with religious objections to the COVID-19 injections are a threat to the safety of others. The booster mandate, they also argued, quote, violates the doctrine of unconstitutional conditions, which prohibits the government from conditioning a privilege on the surrender of a constitutional right, unquote. Last year, a U.S. district judge ruled against the nurses, saying they, quote, failed to demonstrate likelihood of success on the merits of their claim that the executive orders violate their liberty rights under the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, unquote, and also failed to demonstrate immediate and irreparable injury. Months later, a U.S. Third Circuit Court of Appeals issued an order that declared their lawsuit moot after the New Jersey mandate was rescinded, but the nurses appealed their case to the Supreme Court. Mr. Murphy, a Democrat, signed an order in April of this year to lift the vaccine mandate for healthcare workers because, according to the governor, it aligns the state with recent updates to federal requirements and reflects our different circumstances now as compared to the past few years. It's not the first time the U.S. Supreme Court has turned away a challenge to vaccine mandates. In 2022, the court declined to hear a challenge by Missouri and 9 other states to President Joe Biden's COVID-19 mandate that had been issued for healthcare facilities that get federal funds. That mandate was later rescinded as the public health emergency ended earlier this year. The Supreme Court ruled 5-4 in January 2022 to let the Biden administration enforce the healthcare worker mandate, while litigation on its legal merits continued in lower courts. At the same time, the justices decided 6-3 to halt the administration's rule requiring vaccines or weekly COVID-19 tests for employees at businesses with less than 300 employees. In New York City, in a separate case, a judge ruled in September that 10 employees fired by the New York City Department of Education for refusing the COVID-19 vaccine must be reinstated with pay. At the time, New York State Supreme Court Judge Ralph J. Porzio ruled that the city's denials of religious accommodation to employees were capricious, arbitrary, and illegal. This court sees no rational basis for not allowing unvaccinated classroom teachers in amongst an admitted population of primarily unvaccinated students, George Porzio wrote in the ruling. As such, the decision to summarily deny the classroom teachers amongst the panel petitioners based on an undue hardship without any further evidence of individualized analysis is arbitrary, capricious, and unreasonable. As such, each classroom teacher amongst the panel petitioners is entitled to a religious exemption from the vaccine mandate. Last month, the New York Supreme Court Appellate Division dismissed an appeal by New York State health officials of a ruling issued in January by a state Supreme Court judge that overturned the state's COVID-19 mandate for healthcare workers in the state. A court in August 2022, meanwhile, ruled that Illinois healthcare workers who were fired or otherwise affected by vaccine mandates would receive a $10 million settlement. A group of about 500 healthcare workers in the state had filed a suit against North Shore University Health System, alleging the system wouldn't grant them religious exemptions. Thanks for listening to Epoch Audio. That was U.S. Supreme Court Rejects Challenge to COVID-19 Vaccine Mandate, written by Jack Phillips, read by Susan Williams. Reuters contributed to this report.
For more Epoch Times articles in text, please visit theepochtimes.com.
This is the Epoch Times.